to you by Tammy Cakes, the Alan Lindsay's Movie Memories Museum, and East Tennessee Media.
All right, everybody, welcome to another exciting edition of Baseball Now. I am your host, as always, Scotty Cashin. We got an exciting episode for you today. We don't have not just one, but two of our analysts in the studio with us today. We're going to go ahead and discuss the weekly recap and the playoff picture power rankings and more. So without further ado, we're going to introduce our two analysts. We've got Thomas, our lead analyst. How's it going,
Hey, how you
Thomas?
doing? Hey, how you doing, Scott? I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Welcome back to the show, as always.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we got our other analyst from Georgia, Greg. Greg, how you doing today?
Good. How's it going, guys? Glad to be
Pretty
here.
good. Pretty good. Thomas, let's start with you. Let's get a look at our weekly recap. What do you got for us?
All right, folks. Let's go ahead and get rolling here. All right, so as you see for week 21, you had the Georgia Dominators. That's myself at 505 points, beating Jackson, the Warner Robin Bombers at 334. Then you had a very tight ball game at the last second. Probably made Dad's hair stand up or Ruben's hair stand up. Probably Greg got so excited just to fail. The Atlanta Express at 431 and Greg at 428. A really good ball game there. Next game on the schedule for week 21, you had the Gatlinburg Cubs at 478. That's you, Scotty. Against Macon Chili Dogs, Ken at 371. Interesting game there. And another interesting game down here at the bottom. You have the Wildcats, that's Tammy, against Just a Little Crazy, that's Dan. And now their series is tied up at 1-1-1. 442 for the Cats and 407 for Dan's Just a Little Crazy. That was a really interesting ball game. The whole week, I think that was within like 50, 60 point margin.
That looks really.
Yep.
That could be something to look forward to the playoffs.
Which matchup is that?
The Wildcats and That's a Little Crazy.
Yeah, I mean that could be a first. That could be another preview, and you'll probably see that again. Just like you'll probably see the matchup that we'll discuss a little bit later on in the program between the Demon Ducks and the Georgia Dominators. That could be a first round matchup immediately following this week.
Yep.
Looks like it.
So your top performer, Lindor with 51. Looks like Stone, Aaron Judge with 85. So it looks like Aaron Judge's 85 points was the top performer across the league this week. And it looks like Stone was second with 74 points. So that was really interesting to have those two players up there. I see a couple of other players that are kind of new to the top performers. Lindor, Assad, De La Cruz is kind of new. Gallen. I hadn't seen Rodon in there for a while. Creamer. Otani's been in there for a minute. Soto, I just seen him pop up. It's been a while since I've seen Soto.
Soto has been, I think that trade has really, really worked out for both parties.
I agree, especially getting Chris Sale. Chris Sale has been, I think the lowest Chris Sale has had was like 15 points. So that's pretty much the Dominators move on the season to 13-8. The Warner Robin Bombers moved to 7-14. The Demon Ducks moved to 13-8. The Express go to 11-10. The Cubs at the bottom of the barrel go to 7-14.
I thought they got their 8th victory this week.
Do what?
I thought they won their 8th game this week.
Well,
I guess I thought wrong.
I guess you were seeing stuff. And then the Wildcats move. They moved to 12-8-1. And Dan moves to 13-7-1. And that's been your look at the week 21 recap.
I just can't believe how close that game come between the Express and the Ducks.
I mean, that came down at the last second. I thought that was over early Sunday afternoon, and that's why you don't count your chickens before they
Well,
hatch.
especially, it seems like for the last 2 or 3 weeks, Gunnar Henderson's been on a tear for Baltimore.
Yeah,
Till
yeah, that's what it
last
seems
week,
like.
he ain't got nothing this last week.
I mean, he just decided to go 0 for right at the right time.
Yeah. Over. And then when I sit somebody on the bench, they should have been playing. But that's what happens. That's how it is. You make a decision, you make a decision.
Yep, that's right. Look at me. I've made a few bad moves this year, obvious from the 14 losses.
So
I
you're
don't know if
14.
I don't know if a few bad moves really describes their season.
It's been a bad season, but something that we're in the Cubs
But
camp
I mean,
is
and all honestly, though, you're kind of used to bad seasons, right?
all except in football, buddy.
Which football?
NFL.
Oh.
So
Can't say that about your volunteers, huh?
season ain't started yet, buddy. Just wait. Clemson's coming for you.
Okay,
But,
so I wanted to ask your opinion going after seeing what we did last week, some close ball games. Scott, I wanted to ask you and ask Greg. So who would you take right now as your team to beat out of the playoff teams, considering the schedule that we just played?
Out of the 4 playoff teams?
Yeah, out of the 4 playoff teams that's in now.
has to be the Dominators.
Yeah, I would say so. That's who I'm going to knock out this week.
I would probably go with the Wildcats.
I mean, that could be. I mean, I don't remember exactly where the Wildcats finished last year. I don't exactly remember where, but she's had a really good season.
I think the Wildcats finished at the I think they finished at the bottom along with you.
And a few others. The Express was down there, and
The Express was down there. No, I don't remember exactly where she finished.
What
I think
about
the
you,
Wildcats
Greg?
did pretty good.
What
What do
about
you-
me?
what's your opinion?
The team I'm looking at hardest right now is probably Dominators.
And that's probably who you're going to be paired up against first round.
Yeah, I mean because they got good pitching and hitting, and it seems like it's on a roll right now.
But Thomas, let's go ahead and turn to you about your playoff picture since we talked about the playoffs.
All right, let's go ahead and look at the standings. Sorry. Let's go ahead and look at the standings. Okay, here we go.
Little technical difficulties.
No, just a distraction cat.
Another fat cat.
But he's not fat.
I didn't know which one it was.
Let's not get political on the show, guys.
Is that good right there, Scotty?
I can see it.
Okay, so folks, the standings right now, a couple different scenarios can play out. But as you see, you've got everybody from the Express down eliminated. A couple of interesting things. You've got the Cubs that have moved up to number 6. The Chili Dogs that were at one point a playoff contender have went down. And the Warner Robin Bombers that were good have also kind of cooled off a little bit. But you have first, right now, you have number 1, Dan, still hanging on by a half game over the Demon Ducks and over the Georgia Dominators. Right now, the Demon Ducks hold a tiebreaker over the Dominators due to their 2-1 series lead. But
Soon to be 3-1.
this week could change that. If the Dominators win, the Dominators move ahead of the Demon Ducks. If the Demon Ducks win, then the Demon Ducks stay where they are. And the Demon Ducks, with a first, we'll go ahead. The Wildcats are at number 4. They're a game back of first. What's interesting, I think this is really awesome that you have 5. Well, you have 5 teams that are 2.5 games out of first. That's a really tight margin. But you got 4 teams that are within a game of being the number 1 seed.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
That's pretty that's pretty dadgum good when you really
It
think
is.
about it.
I don't think in all of our years of doing baseball, I've ever seen that.
I haven't either. And you've got a couple, and who would have thought that potentially a 12-10 team would miss the playoffs?
That being the Express.
I mean, that's a good. I mean, that's not a great record, but that.
Well, wait a minute.
that's
How
a
are you
playoff
counting?
record.
How are you counting 12 victories when he's only got 11?
Well, I'm just saying, if he does win this week, that would be 12-10.
I don't
Or
think
even
that's going.
or if he so happens to lose this week, that would be 11-11. That's still a pretty good record to miss the playoffs.
Yeah,
Considering in the past we've had teams get in, 9-12, 10-12. So a couple things can play out this week. One, with a victory, with a Greg victory and a Dan loss, Greg would move back into number 1 seed. With Dan, a victory, he'll retain number 1 seed. A win by the Dominators and a loss by Dan moves the Dominators up to the number 1 seed.
Even if I win? Oh, I can't
And-
win if you win. That's right.
And Greg, if you win and Dan loses, then you jump Dan. But if I win and Dan goes down, I jump over both of y'all. The Wildcats, I don't think the Wildcats can take over number 1 seed, considering that they would be 13-8-1. Actually, no, they cannot, because the Demon Ducks and the Dominators are both a half game ahead of the Wildcats. So whoever wins out of those two is going to be ahead of the Wildcats anyway. So you've got the Just Little Crazy Dan, you've got the Demon Ducks, you've got the Dominators. Any of those 3 can move into number 1. The Wildcats, the highest they can go would be number 2, and that would change their matchup. As we'll look at the projected matchups here in a second. And the Dominators could go down to 4. The Ducks could slide down to 4. I don't think Dan can quite slide down to 4. I think he would slide down to 3. But either one of those factors change, then you're looking at a totally different playoff field, which we'll go ahead and look at now. We'll go ahead and look at that playoff bracket now, as it's pretty much been the same. It's pretty much been the same bracket. Can y'all see that?
yes, I can.
Yep.
So it's pretty much been the same bracket that it's been the last couple of weeks. You got the 4 seed Wildcats versus Dan. We just seen that matchup last week. Then you had the Dominators against the Ducks, and you'll see this match. That would actually be, if this holds true, that would be the 5th meeting between the Dominators and the Demon Ducks. So, but if there's a lot of switching around, you could have the Dominators versus the Wildcats, Dan versus Greg, which both of those I think would be really, very entertaining and very close ball games. You could have the Dominators versus Just a Little Crazy Dan, which would probably be a tight ball game. Then you could have the Ducks versus the Wildcats. The Ducks versus the Wildcats. That I think the Ducks would rather not face Wildcats, but still.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but so if it matches up, you and Greg, that being your 5th matchup, you could quite possibly finish the year below 500 against him.
Well, I mean, I could finish 2. I'm below 500 against him now. He's got me 2-1. I mean, if I lose this week and go down 1-3, and if I face him next week and beat him, I'll be 2-3, and I would still be in the championship round while he'll be down.
Well,
So,
personally, my
I
personal
mean,
opinion is I think he's got your number this year. I think the Ducks have got the Dominators' numbers.
the last game didn't. The last game between me and the Ducks didn't go too well for the Demon Ducks.
Because I didn't play that week. I took the week off.
Their
Well, I mean,
their
if you
quack
took the week
attack
off
got
that week,
stopped.
that's not too smart of you if you took the week off.
Their quack attack got stopped.
And they only won the first two games that the Demon Ducks defeated the Dominators was by combined 30 points. So,
It don't matter how many points you win by, as long as you win.
well, yeah, but still. Scott, that's been your look at the projected playoff, which I would be surprised if it don't change.
You think it
But
will?
probably so. I would say
You
maybe.
think so?
It's been like this for the last 3 weeks, so it may or may not change.
What about the other playoff bracket?
I think we're going to take a look at the consolation and the battle for number 5th seed. That battle for the 5th spot. I think we're going to take a look at that on next week's Baseball Now show. The playoff, which would be the playoff pre-show, and we'll have also the look at the consolation bracket and what's going on. And I do want to point out, unrelated to the playoff bracket that we're viewing right now on the screen, but I do want to point out though that within the next couple of days, be on the lookout for a update from the commissioner's office because of Jackson Warner Robin Bombers going over on starting pitching for the second time this year. That will be dealt with swiftly.
Right, guys. I mean, that's just something I think the whole league needs to, moving forward next year, needs to be a whole lot more.
And I'm already looking at the idea, because there's not a whole lot you can do this year. I am looking at the idea of next year there being some swift penalties, because it's got to stop. Because I also put out at the beginning of the year, and I'll continue to put it out, that if there is an issue with your pitching, if you're sick or what have you, that you can let me know and I can make a change on your behalf. I can go on the computer and move a player, and I will do that just to keep you from going over. But I can't do it if nobody don't say anything. I mean, I can't. My hands are tied.
Right, which is
But that'll
understandable.
be coming out. That'll be coming out within probably by next. I'll probably have an answer on that by next Monday's Baseball Now. Probably on the Baseball Now program.
As far as a penalty for next year.
And yeah, Greg, as far as the penalty for next year that I just said.
I mean, for him, for going over.
Yeah.
Right, okay. For you too, Greg.
I ain't been over you.
Greg, was you asleep when I just said that?
No, I was actually looking at our scores for the week, right? The matchups today. I was just.
But that'll either be, Scott, that'll either be on the Thursday bullpen show if we have one. That'll either be then or on Monday's Baseball Now. I haven't quite made my decision yet.
Got it. And we look forward to hearing from the commissioner's office, as we always do.
And that is your look at the Week 22 playoff bracket.
A very interesting look, Thomas. Thank you.
Yep, anytime.
But Greg, do you happen to think do you happen to have any opinion on who's hot, who's not this week?
For the week we just finished?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, on my team, the one player that was hot was my Dodger pitcher. He was really good this week. And Stone was very good this week, almost 70 points. And then the team I just got through playing, the Yankee, I can't think of his name right now. Who is he? Oh, Aaron Judge. It's just killing the ball, hitting home run after home run after home run. Then you have, like Thomas was saying, his pitchers, and you've had a couple good hitters going right now. I've also had some very untimely negatives on my pitching staff.
All right, Thomas, who's your pick for who's hot, who's not this week?
I haven't really paid attention. I just pay attention to the on who's getting me enough points to where I can win the matchup.
I'm talking about our usual who's hot, who's not.
We're gonna do an update on the scores for the week we're in now.
Well, right now, looks like Greg is taking a little bit of a lead, which is not unexpected because Greg has actually got 2 pitchers going and I have 0, so that's not unexpected. So I'm not really sure what the excitement's about.
No, I'm just talking about a couple of the matchups. I see Chili Dog's got a kind of commanding lead over Just a Little Crazy. Just a little crazy.
The question is though, how many pitchers are the Chili Dogs going to throw this week?
I would say probably 4.5, 5.
I started a couple today, but mine.
And since Greg brought up that good point, folks, I do want to bring a graphic on the screen. Since Greg brought up that point, let's go ahead and take a look at our games this week and what's going on. So we've got the Georgia Dominators. This was as of, I'm not sure, earlier this evening. You got the Georgia Dominators versus Greg Lindsay, the Damon Ducks, for the 4th time. You've got the Atlanta Express, Ruben versus Scotty, the Gatlinburg Cubs. You've got the Warner Robin Bombers, Jackson versus Tammy with the Wildcats. And you got the Chili Dogs, Ken versus the Just a Little Crazy Dan. That's what's going on this week. As we've said before, these have playoff, there's no playoff spot on the line this week. Everybody's clinched, but these do have seeding and matchups for next week's playoffs. They do have a ripple effect. 2 of them do. That's 3 of them. 3 of the games do. The only game that doesn't really do anything is the Express against the small Cubs.
What's something that I find interesting, just looking at the scores, I've seen the Braves jumped out to a big, massive lead in the first inning again.
What's the score?
9-1.
And Dan's pitcher is pitched 2 innings. It's got -17.
The biggest thing is though can the Braves hold on to that lead? That's the problem.
Well, that depends.
So we're kind of running a little bit close on the time. So you kind of got me. I had this stuff, Scott. I had everything pulled up that I wanted to pull up, with the exception of the power rankings. The one thing that I did not get to.
I'll give you
folks, I just gotten home from where I had to work today, so I didn't have time to get really prepared like I usually do for a program. Let's see here.
Well, we like to throw you on this every once in a while, throw you a curveball.
So we're gonna try this. I don't know how this is gonna go. If that little screen can go away, that would be great. We're going to try this. I don't know how this is going to go.
While Thomas is planning this and doing this, I just want to remind all of our viewers, make sure you turn in Sunday for another edition of Game Day on Cash and Sports, our college football show. It'll be another interesting week, and it'll also be the first week that we'll have scores and points that'll be done, because everybody knows college football kicks off Saturday. Even though I believe we got a couple of games Thursday earlier this week, the majority of the games are Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. I know everybody's looking forward to it, but you can catch game day and baseball now next week right here on Cash and Sports.
I have the power rankings for you, Scotty.
I think the commissioner is right in the process of it.
Well, I just made a change,
I seen that.
and I think that was the right call for this week.
No. How can he be at number one when he suffered a loss?
Well, because the simple fact that he's still a strong team.
Huh. I just agree with number 2 and 3 because Dominators have been dominated by the Ducks all year.
The Dominators have won their 2 games by the Ducks by less than 50 points.
That's okay. I really think, my opinion, I think the Gatlinburg Cubs should be sitting at number 5.
I happen, as a Cubs general manager, I happen to agree with you, Greg.
I'd almost put you at number 4. Because how did you start out the season? 0 and what?
0-10.
So 0 and 10, and you've come up. So out of the last 11 weeks, you're 7 and 4. That's pretty good.
I'll explain it here. I'll explain here in a second.
What can I say?
Why these are what they are.
What can I say? My Cubs always finish the year strong. We might struggle out of the starting gate, but we always finish strong.
Strong and out of the playoffs.
Wait till next year.
All right, so here we go, folks. Here's what we got for the power rankings for week 22. We've got just a little crazy at Dan 13-7-1. I think Dan I still think Dan, even though he lost last week on a very close loss to Wildcats, that their series is tied. I still think right now Dan is slightly the team to beat. 2, I have the Dominators over the Demon Ducks, myself over Greg. It's just simply because Greg lost last week, even though it was a 3-point loss. Greg lost. I mean, you could really 2 and 3. You could really flip a quarter. I can move one or the other. You can really flip a quarter. There's no separation between 2 and 3. And then 4, you've got the Wildcats. You've got the Express at 5 because of their record. I can't, as of Greg's point and as your point, Scott, I cannot put the Cubs at 7-14 ahead of an Express team that's won 4 more games than the Cubs. And then you've got the Chili Dogs at 7-14, and then you've got Jackson at 7-14. Like I said, there's the top 4. There's really I don't think there's no gap. Any one of those 4 teams can win the playoff and can win the championship, I think. I can make a big argument for Dan. I could make an argument for myself. I can make an argument for Greg. I can make an argument for Tammy, the Wildcats team. I can make the argument for any of them. And that power ranking can change. Like I said, 2 and 3, you can flip really all of them. You could really just throw them all out the window because it really don't mean nothing until we find out who wins the championship. Quite honestly, it don't mean it don't mean a thing.
Right.
But that's your power rankings, and this is probably going to be the final power rankings of this year.
No end of the year power rankings after the playoffs.
No. I might put one out next week. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put one out next week, but next week will be the final one. But here's the thing, though. The Georgia Dominators have not been on top of the power rankings at all this year.
No, I've noticed that.
The Dominators have not been there at all. The Demon Ducks have had their time in the spotlight. They and the Just a Little Crazies had their time in the spotlight, and the Wildcats have had their time, and the Express have had their time in the spotlight. So it's like the Dominators are just sneaking up. I will say, though, the record against playoff teams doesn't really look that impressive for the Dominators. So
Goodbye.
something's gonna have to give with the Dominators, because it's like everybody else has got a decent record against 500 teams, except the Dominators don't really have that record. So
Right.
we're gonna see if this is a finesse team or if this is a really good team that's just being slept on. But
Right.
that's your power rankings for week number 22, Scott.
Well, as always, guys, we're running close on time, but as always, I really enjoyed having both y'all on the show tonight.
I
Greg,
enjoyed it.
I
before we
enjoyed it.
go,
Thank you.
before
Greg,
we
go get a
go,
haircut.
do what? What'd you say, Thomas?
I told Greg. I, t- I told Greg to go get a haircut. Sorry, y'all. I'm being distracted by the wrestling TV.
Do we have any send-off message from our own McAfee over there with his hair?
Send off message. It's going to have to be Dominator's going to get dominated by the Ducks. The Ducks are going to march to the playoffs as the number 1 seed.
Well,
Just bring it, Greg.
Don't Ducks water.
I'm bringing it.
Just bring it, buddy.
All right, folks, that's all the time we got tonight for Baseball Now. As always, I'm your host, Scott. For Thomas, for Greg, be sure to like us and follow us on Facebook on Cash and Sports and East Tennessee Media, and on our YouTube channels, Cash and Sports and East Tennessee Media. We hope all y'all have a great night. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Good night, folks.
Good night, everybody.